Hello and welcome to Across Africa. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith with our weekly look at stories from across the continent. Coming up in the programme, in Burkina Faso, the suspension of the trial in absentia of former President Blaise Compaoré and his cabinet is a worrying development for those hoping that he'll be held to account for a fatal crackdown on protesters in 2014. Also, Sub-Saharan Africa is the region most affected by AIDS in the world. Around a fifth of children in West Africa have lost at least one parent to the disease. We head to Togo to meet some of the kids struggling to move forward without their family. And a photography exhibition in Kenya is putting seldom-celebrated moments of African life centre frame. Everyday Africa focuses on the little moments at the heart of the continent's communities. But first, in Burkina Faso, critics of former President Blaise Compaoré's regime have vowed to take to the streets in protest if his trial is discontinued. They're worried after it was adjourned for a month following his lawyers' claims that he wouldn't receive a fair hearing. Compaoré is being tried in absentia, facing assassination charges linked to a fatal crackdown on the uprising that toppled him in 2014.
As the president of the Family of Martyrs Association, Victor visits some of those who lost relatives during the crackdown on the anti-government protests of 2014. For 3 years now, these families have lobbied for justice. Since the end of April, former President Blaise Compaoré and his government have been on trial at the High Court, but 3 weeks in, and morale is low amongst many of those hoping the case will help them come to terms with their loss.
It's very important for us to play our role, to comfort and to visit victims' families. Because once they heard all these announcements of postponements, they were alarmed.
Survivors of the unrest also share their distress with Victor. Many still feel deeply angry about Compaoré's regime. This woman's wounds still haven't healed, and bullet wounds have deformed Jean's legs forever. Nevertheless, he says he's ready to return to the streets in protest if the trial is discontinued.
We're very concerned. We don't know how it will end. If it doesn't end well, we'll have even more courage than we had on October the 30th and the 31st in 2014, and we'll go out again for a bigger insurrection than before.
The victims of the uprising are already preparing for the worst. If the trial is dropped, they've already made banners emblazoned with slogans aimed at the High Court and featuring the faces of some of those killed during Blaise Compaoré's 27 years in power.
Kibera in Nairobi is the largest urban slum in Africa. Communities there can struggle to get clean drinking water because of the tight control and inflated costs imposed by cartels controlling local resources. But access to water is getting easier, in part because of a project to improve rooftop plumbing. Our correspondents report.
Hundreds of thousands of Kibera's residents spend half their days just collecting water. In this informal settlement, there are few boreholes and little government infrastructure. The in-ground pipes are old and often contaminated with sewage. The only available drinking water is sold by cartels who control the prices.
Anytime you want to have a water selling point, you have to talk to the cartels. They decide how much money should be paid, and they decide where you will sell the water.
This woman has few options nearby. She needs water for her food stand and doesn't have the time to make the long trip to more affordable water points.
Water costs 5 shillings. Cartel prices are very high. But if I want to pay less, the other water source is just too far away.
The cost is 5 times higher than the rate recommended by the city water company. One NGO is fighting back against the cartels and the spread of deadly waterborne diseases. This new aerial piping system supplies filtered water to collection points throughout the slum.
The changes that we've noticed is that the disease incidences have been reduced. Cases of insecurity associated with water, for example, waste, has gone down tremendously. At the same time, the girl child is able to use her time productively in terms of going to school.
But residents say the most immediate change is an increase in their purchasing power.
Nowadays, we just use 2 bob on getting this water. So we spend some money on buying even vegetables and maize flour.
88,000 residents already benefit from the new system, and that number is expected to double in the coming weeks. Their ultimate goal is to fully equip all of Nairobi's slums with the new system.
Sub-Saharan Africa remains the region most affected by AIDS in the world. It's where 2/3 of new infections happen. An estimated 1 in 5 children in West Africa have lost at least one parent to the disease. Our correspondents have headed to Togo to meet some of the kids struggling to move forward without their families.
Delphine cannot contain her tears when evoking her parents who died of AIDS 5 years ago. At just 22, the emotional emptiness that has taken hold and the new responsibilities that have fallen on her shoulders made her age prematurely.
What's hard for me is that I have to figure out, as soon as I wake up, how I'm going to feed my brothers and sisters and how I'm going to help them understand. And I also pray that nothing happens to them.
In Dapaon, a region of northern Togo, about 60 children like them live alone in extreme poverty. These humanitarian workers had promised their mother to support her children after her death.
When you look at these children, what can their future be? You cannot tell them that it will get better, because there is a difference between their lives and the lives of others.
Rejected by their family and their neighborhood, school is the children's last social bond, where they are still enrolled, thanks to the support of the organization.
I ask God to give me the strength to be able to bear what people do to me.
When children are infected at birth by AIDS, they are sent to this center, the only structure in Togo where they are not excluded.
At first, people are afraid of the illness, and then they're hit by the cost of medical follow-ups. When you have fragile health, you need money all the time to pay hospital bills.
The one that the children call Mama Rita knows they're suffering well. She has lost 5 members of her family because of AIDS.
They're my strength and joy, and I know what it's like. It's very hard, because I was a victim too.
A third of the 100 children living in this center has AIDS. The others have seen their parents die. Together, they help each other break free from their suffering.
The 16th of May 1997 was the day that Mobutu Sese Seko, the flamboyant military dictator of DR Congo, then called Zaire, relinquished power and fled Kinshasa as rebels entered the city. Now, his 3-decade-long rule became notorious for corruption, excess and abuse. He was also determined to purge the country of colonial influences. We take a look back at his infamous leadership.
Mobutu Sese Seko was born into a modest family in 1930. He rose to become one of Congo's most famous leaders. He started out as a journalist. When he was only 30, he joined the government of Patrice Lumumba, the independence hero. But then Mobutu, backed by the CIA and the former colonizer Belgium, turned against Lumumba, who was murdered. In 1965, Mobutu seized power and remained president for 32 years. Initially, he was popular.
In 1965, he told the Congolese people, "You are worthy people, you are no longer slaves. This land belongs to you. It is our country."
In 1974, Congo made world headlines when Mobutu organized a boxing match between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman in Kinshasa, the famous Rumble in the Jungle. But from early on, his regime brutally repressed the opposition, and corruption was widespread. Asked about his wealth, he responded rather nonchalantly.
Some say that my fortune is worth double the national debt, but I say prove it.
On the 16th of May 1997, he fled Kinshasa as the rebel troops of Laurent Désiré Kabila entered the city. Mobutu went to Morocco. He did not live long outside of his presidential palace. Mobutu died on the 7th of September 1997, just 4 months after his downfall.
Well, to Kenya now, where a photography exhibition's shedding light on aspects of African life that seldom end up under the spotlight. Everyday Africa started out as an Instagram feed of images capturing day-to-day moments from across the continent. Clément Bonero tells us more.
breaking stereotypes one image at a time. The Everyday Africa project started out as an Instagram feed in 2012. The aim to change negative perceptions of the continent. A book has now been published, featuring 267 photographs by 30 photographers from around the world.
Making a book is not just about the photography. We've also included the comments people leave on Instagram and so on, sort of the good, the bad, the ugly. And the idea there is that we're also preserving how people feel about Africa right now at this time and how people communicate today via social media.
Some of the best photos in the book are now on display at the French Cultural Centre in Nairobi. Many of the contributing photographers include bloggers and journalists from across Africa. They say debunking clichés about the continent has been a rewarding yet challenging experience.
Pictures are very important. When I'm taking a photo, what I want to do is to arouse the curiosity of the person who will see that picture. I want them to ask themselves what was happening there. I don't just take pictures for the sake of it. I want them to have an impact.
The Everyday Africa project has sparked a global movement, inspiring dozens of feeds on Instagram, most aimed at deepening understanding of cities, countries and continents worldwide. The Everyday Africa exhibition will also be hosted in Casablanca, New York, Istanbul and Delhi.
Well, that's it for Across Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.